Welcome to Explore, Explain, Highlights. In this Highlights package, we'll be looking at Season 4, Episode 4, our live episode with our guests from the Nightingale editorial team, discussing the Nightingale Magazine.
So we're going to start off by looking at the kind of broader context of the magazine. And my first question, which I'm going to just sort of run past Jason, is what was the origin story? Where did all this come from? Why have we got a magazine now? What was the sort of moment when you thought, you know what, let's do a magazine?
Hi, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for the interview. So it really started with the literal moment that the DVS started. It was like a Slack group. I happen to know the co-founders and Elijah Meeks. I remember writing him, and I even went back and checked this. Literally, my 7th message to him was, you know, if this whole thing works, we could make a really kick-ass publication. And he was like, oh, that's the cart before the horse. And I was like, yeah, we can even turn it into a print magazine. And so the truth is that I really had a vision for what could be possible with Nightingale since really the very first moments of the DVS. So they're really, really connected.
Yeah, and obviously we've seen the lineage of the DVS from the community and the sort of Slack environment that everyone's chatting away, and it's brilliantly overwhelming on there. You've got the digital side of the journal, you've got the print journal, you've got events like this spin out, so it's all kind of wonderfully kind of coalescing together. And on that note of vision, and I'll start off with you again here for this, Jason. You spoke in one of the pieces that you wrote about the kind of reflections about this collective vision to focus on the community, which is what this is all about in the first instance, but to bring a new standard of design and editorial quality to our approach. I mean, what's driving you to bring that? What's your passion behind all this?
Well, I mean, I look at data visualization as a way of kind of embracing the world through design, a certain type of design, and I think that because there is a kind of a data analytics, data science kind of lens that's often applied, a scientific lens that's often applied towards data viz, that it's kind of missing a lot. There's just a whole lot more out there in the world. And so when we first started talking about the print magazine, because I kind of have to break these things kind of in smaller bits. And I remember saying to the editors, I was like, yeah, I want to do a fashion magazine for data viz. And they were like, what? And so I think that's the catch, is that there's just simply so many things that we haven't really explored yet as a community of practitioners, and even just as far as subject matter goes, that other groups have already done. There's lots of different ways of communicating. And as we see at the conference here, there's a number of different ways that people are using similar mindsets to apply towards different types of problems to be discussed.
Right. So next up the question is, why the hell would you launch a print magazine in this era of digital? We'll come to you in a second, Jason, but first of all, Julie, it was a big print fan, it seems.
So we definitely live in an area where most of everything is digitalized, and that's the main of my job. But still, I believe everyone is obsessed with paper, and publishing something, it's still the biggest achievement you can have in your life. I think not only printing something, but seeing your name print on something and be able to say and see it and show it to other people. And so I think it's really weird because we still kind of fantasize being printed, So for me, that totally makes sense. And as a designer, of course, print is an amazing area to explore. And there's a lot of constraints that you have to work with print, and they're really creative. But I do think that when you do digital visualization, you also have a lot of constraints. So for me, they're just two different sets of constraints, and I love them both, really. But I would say that in print, the fact that you have this final product that you can handle in your hand that really live in the real world, it's one of the most thrilling feeling you can ever have. So I'm super grateful to Nightingale to be able to carry this baby in the world. So what
I appreciate about digital is that you get that instantaneous response from people. Things can go up very quickly, but there's something to be said about the curation of a printed publication and the staying power of having something that is that tangible and can be used not as just a glossy magazine, but also as a resource going forward. Not something that just passes through your Twitter feed, but something that you can pull off your shelf and go back to for inspiration and for ideas.
And that was the thing that Claire spoke about as well, this idea that we've got this sort of fly-by nature of social media. You see all these charts flying through your feed and your timeline, and they don't always stick. You don't always have time to look at them. But there's something about print where there's a degree of archiving, there's a degree of curation, there's a degree of permanence and sort of preservation that digital we can't rely on. I mean, we always remember the era of Flash disappearing, and that kind of killed all those digital pieces. So I guess, you know, anything further to add from your perspective about the beauty of print, the value of print in this era?
So I'm just struck by the fact that I haven't written about this before, but I actually thought about the other idea that really was an input is that I was doing all this research about historic meteorological data, and there were professional societies that made journals that were then put into libraries, and those libraries were, of course, archived, so I could find the thoughts of the moment of a community, you know, historically speaking, from our libraries. And that was actually, that's why it's called the Journal of the Data Visualization Society. Right. Is because it actually is a journal of our community's thinking, and that's why we want it to be in multiple different formats.
Absolutely. From the context to the content, this is the visible stuff that we see in the magazine. And the first question then is, you know, how is this content shaped? Because obviously each issue has a defined theme. And we've got a little contribution from Claire just to sort of talk about how this is perhaps shaped by you guys.
Our editorial committee also weighs in on some of the direction of the magazine. So even if they're not involved in really the day-to-day production, we do want to make sure that Nightingale Magazine reflects the interests and perspectives of the community. And so things like picking the theme for the next magazine, or the community spotlight where we ask people to send in little quick photos and some little blurb to just get a glimpse into people's lives around the world. Those are things where we may come up with 3 or 4 ideas within the core team and put it to a vote with our editorial committee so that we're getting some outside input as well. We also always start off each issue with a big committee meeting, and we like to set up, I know you've seen the image of the Google Jamboard with all these sticky notes where we're brainstorming. And so once we've selected a theme, the committee, and these are all just volunteer editors, anyone who wants will be part of that session where we brainstorm directions that we could take that theme, the types of content we might want to see in the magazine. And that's what really sort of launches everything. So we do have a big group of people who weigh in some way, and we do think it's important to credit them all because we absolutely couldn't do it without them.
So yeah, we've seen this big Jamboard, so there's plenty of issues there, looking at it.
Plenty of ideas.
I mean, you know, just very quickly, what's the sort of rationale that you kind of end up saying, right, that is the theme that we're going to go with?
I think you want to make a theme that's going to be broad enough where you can really explore in it, right? You want to be able to kind of tick some initial boxes and then kind of challenge what the perception of, let's say, guidelines or culture is. And what was really fascinating in our first editorial meeting about to do the theme for #1, culture, is almost everybody interpreted the word culture differently. And so we're like, yes, add it in, right? And I think when you get to a theme, I mean, we haven't done it yet. To a degree, the guidelines as a theme was a little provocative for ourselves. Like, can we take guidelines and make it diverse enough to be as kind of well-rounded? But yeah, I mean, again, I don't think we've really even scratched the surface of what kind of subjects we can talk about in database.
Absolutely. On to the design. So Julie, as the creative director, has very much sort of led on this, and she's got some wonderful thoughts on the story of the artwork and the art design, the art direction. And it begins...
I haven't seen this. I'm really curious.
Yeah. Well, there's a bit I cut out about the disagreement you've had creatively about the spine art, but we won't go into that right now.
Okay.
So the cover art, the story of these really kind of wonderful front covers. Let's hear from Julie.
For the egg, the voila moment of visualization really strikes upon me too, because all the other iteration that I did was illustration that I created, and I really didn't thought about using an image like a photograph. And I really tried it. I don't know, you know, when it's been like several hours, you're trying something on a project and you're kind of in this zombie mode when you're just doing stuff. And so I just put this image, but just like, you know, throw it there. And I was like, oh my God, but it works. and I reflect on all the past hours I spent trying to do illustration and thinking to myself, okay, that was worthless because obviously this is it. And so when I showed the different covers to the rest of the team, it was the last one that I showed as well. And everyone was like, oh, okay, so nah, not this one. So, and for the juice box, it was a bit different because the first one, the chick one, it's like the image was already done. I didn't create myself. We put the photograph that created it on the magazine. This one, I really did it. Playing with a mock-up. And the way I do it, maybe because I have a literary background, but it's really just thinking of the word. So I was like, inspiration, what is inspiration? What is inspiration? And I thought for me, inspiration is really some kind of intake, you know, like something I would try to feed myself every day. And in France, we had this campaign from the government that said that every day you have to eat 5 fruits et légumes par jour. So, you know, like 5 fruits and vegetables every day. And that's really where it's going. So it starts with actually a salad, like some kind of, vegetables. And then I move on to the juice box. And then I was like, oh yeah, you know, that's inspiration is our energy juice as designer. So it is it. And then it just worked, I think.
And I'll come to you in a second about the artwork, but Julie, I mean, that video is just one clip of a long spiel she gave about the joy, again, that pleasure she had in these iterations, and they've worked so well. And I think what was interesting in how she described that these do not need to necessarily sell the magazine. It's not like a classic magazine you see that in this issue, all these different articles. It's more just almost like an enigmatic piece of art to lure people in, that intrigue, that curiosity. Greatest learning experience. So, kicking off with you on this, Jason. I think it's quite a profound statement, but I think it's quite nice. And that idea that obviously you've had very talented people around you so far working on this, and letting them flourish is part of your job, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like the moment of inspiration, which is what Julie was talking about, was like she was struggling. She was like, oh, I have this great idea, but I just can't get it right. And then all of a sudden she shared it, and we're just like, oh my God, that's incredible. Claire's warming stripe project with Cheska was, again, incredible. The fact that she had done so much research on it and talked to the people that he had been inspired by, so it became a story of inspiration, not only a story of impact. And then in the new issue, I'm telling you, you're going to be sharing with all your friends the 12-page accessibility section that Emily has come up with. It is incredible. Yeah, I mean, there are many more examples of this.
Wonderful. Let's hear from the others.
I think one of the most precious things I learned with Nightingale, because we have this time and constraint that is so pushing, and you know, the printer deadline, is that better done than perfect. I think that's how you said it. And in French we said le mieux est l'ennemi du bien, so like best is the enemy of good or something like that. And because if it were only to me, we would never go print. I would, continue to change things and trying to make them better and better. But no, actually, you just have to do something. You just have to do the best you can. And there will be things that are off or wrong. And it doesn't matter, because what matters is that actually it exists and you did it and other people can share that with you. And that really helped me, I think, as a creator, because I have a kind of control freak tendency. And lots of projects I did that never been seen because they were not good enough to be outside. And with Nightingale, I learned to embrace that. No, things are the way they are, and that's good enough, actually, if you tried your best. And that helped me a lot.
I'd say some of the systems that we're setting up, I think going from having no idea how to make a magazine to having what's starting to feel like a pretty professional process feels really good. And we definitely still have room to improve, but just getting those systems in place so that now for issue 3, it feels like we kind of know what we're doing. That's just such a difference from issue 1 or even issue 2.
Such a ruse.
For podcast listeners, Jason is laughing. And one last one from Emily.
Certainly the hardest thing to overcome has been the back-end logistics. As we said, we are learning, we're trying to grow, we're trying to become a better and more well-oiled machine. And there are so many things that are happening behind the scenes in terms of how we distribute and how we print. And those are all challenges that are new to me in this role. As a data journalist, I've always done the writing and the editing, and now I'm doing managing on the back end as well. So that has been a huge challenge, but also very fulfilling.
That's good to know.
Thank you for joining us for this Explore, Explain Highlights episode. As always, the full episode is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. We hope to see you again soon on another episode of Explore, Explain.